A meditation from divine intimacy on fortitude, otherwise known as courage and patience. Presence of God. Teach me, O Lord, to bear my sufferings with fortitude and patience. Meditation 1. Although courage is needed to face or to undertake hard tasks, it is even more necessary in order to persevere in them. Above all, when they are unpleasant or of long duration, and it is impossible to avoid or change them. In this sense, St. Thomas teaches that the principal act of fortitude is not to attack, but to stand firm in the midst of dangers, and to endure struggles, opposition, privations, and persecutions with a virile spirit. In the spiritual life, we meet not only difficulties which can be surmounted and overcome once and for all by a strong act of courage, but we encounter, and this much more frequently, difficult, painful situations from which it is impossible to escape, and which willingly or unwillingly we must face. There are physical ailments which exhaust us and prevent us from extending our activity as we would wish. There are moral sufferings caused by our own temperamental deficiencies, or by contact with persons who are opposed to us or do not understand us. Or again, there is the pain of seeing our loved ones suffer without our being able to relieve them. There is the experience of separation from our friends and loneliness of heart. There are also spiritual troubles due to aridity, interior darkness, weariness of mind, temptations, and scruples. In addition to these, there are all the problems, fatigue, and difficulties inherent in our everyday duties. We know that all these things are planned by God for our sanctification and our good. Nevertheless, that does not prevent us from feeling the weight of them. Suffering is never pleasant, and though we will to accept all for the love of God, we are sometimes tempted to react, to give up, to shake off the yoke, or we are weighed down by sadness and discouragement. What remedy is there? There is the one which Jesus suggested to the apostles after telling them of the persecutions they would have to endure. In your patience you shall possess your souls. Luke 21:19. Patience is the virtue which permits us to live in a state of suffering, hardship, and privation without losing our serenity. It enables us to remain firm amid storms, contradictions, and dangers, without becoming irritated or despondent, without being deterred by them. 2. Christian patience is not the forced resignation of the fatalist or the philosopher who submits to suffering because he cannot escape it. Nor is it the attitude of one who submits because he is not able to react through lack of strength and resources. It is the voluntary acceptance of suffering in view of God and eternal happiness, an acceptance sustained by the knowledge that suffering is absolutely necessary to purify us from sin, to atone for our faults, and to prepare us to meet God. Christian patience incites us to accept suffering serenely and gradually to esteem and love it, not because we see it as an end in life, but rather as a necessary means for attaining the end, which is love of God and union with Him. If Jesus willed to live a life of martyrdom and to die on the cross in order to kindle the fire of charity in us and restore us to friendship with God, how can we expect to attain the plenitude of love and intimacy with God if we do not follow in His footsteps? Christ, therefore, having suffered in the flesh, be you also armed with the same thought, cries St. Peter. 1 Peter 4:1. Let us embrace suffering, then, with the same sentiments which Jesus had, to do the Heavenly Father's will, to atone for sin, and to give Him proof of our love. Christian patience is not merely a passive attitude in the face of suffering. It is also active and voluntary. The latter is the more important because it is this which makes suffering meritorious. A patient man is passive because he wills to be passive, because he uses his free will to submit to all the sufferings which he meets on his way, because he voluntarily bows his shoulders under the yoke of suffering, just as Jesus bowed his under the weight of the cross, because he willed to do so. He was offered because it was his own will, and he opened not his mouth. Isaiah 53:7. A Christian is not a forced Cyrenian, referring to Simon of Cyrene. See Matthew chapter 27, Mark chapter 15, and Luke chapter 23. But a willing one, not in the sense that he goes spontaneously in search of suffering. This would not be feasible for all, and sometimes would be imprudent, but in the more modest sense, whereby he accepts willingly all the suffering which he encounters on his way, recognizing in this the cross offered him by God for his sanctification. Colloquy. O Jesus, the duty of souls admitted to your intimacy is to suffer with you, to raise the cross on high, not to allow it to leave their hands, whatever the perils in which they find themselves, and not to let themselves be found wanting in suffering. Now that you have shown me what a signal blessing it is to suffer trials and persecutions for your sake, I find I cannot cease from desiring trials, for those who follow you must take the way which you took, unless they want to be lost. Blessed are their labors which, even here in this life, have such abundant recompense. O Jesus, what greater proof of your love could you give me than to choose for me all that you willed for yourself? To die or to suffer, this is what I should desire. O Christ crucified, you are sufficient for me. With you I wish to suffer and to take my rest. Grant that I may be crucified with you inwardly and outwardly, and may live in this life in the fullness and satisfaction of my soul, possessing it in patience. Teach me to love trials, and repute them of small account to attain your favor, O Lord, who hesitated not to die for me. O my beloved, All that is rough and toilsome I desire for myself, and all that is sweet and delectable I desire for you.